Back for section 2 of supply. Today we're going to talk about how firms decide how much labor to hire in order to produce a certain level of output. We'll talk about the production cost to a firm, how a firm decides where to set their level of output, and then we'll talk briefly about some factors that a firm should consider before shutting down a profitable business. So some terms here, big econ terms, but nothing you guys can't handle. So we have marginal product of labor, which is the change in output from hiring one additional unit of labor. So in other words, if we hire one more person, how much can that change our output? Okay. So marginal, we're always like adding one more, right? So increasing marginal returns is the level in production in which the marginal product of labor increases as the number of workers increases. In other words, if you hire more people, then you can produce more. But eventually there's a level where the benefit of having more workers starts to diminish. We call that diminishing marginal returns. So you've all been in a group project where like there's 15 of you and there's only enough work for really like 10 people to work on, right? Or you're in a group project with 5 people and there's only enough work for 3, like same sort of idea, right? Then you have like 2 people that are sitting there doing nothing, 5 people, right? Whatever the number is. And so then you have diminishing marginal returns because in the workforce, you're paying those people to hang out and chill in the break room, right? A fixed cost is a cost that does not change no matter how much of a good is produced. So maybe like the factory machinery, the price of that may not change much if you produce 100 versus 200 items of a good. You've already like put that initial investment forward, and so the price of operating that is not going to change much. That's a fixed cost. The variable cost is the cost that rises and falls depending on the quantity produced. So if you make less bookshelves, you're going to use less lumber. So your lumber price is variable. If you're using the factory less, you're going to use less electricity, variable price. Total cost is fixed cost plus variable costs. Marginal, again, that means one more. So marginal cost is the cost of producing one more unit. And marginal revenue, likewise, is the additional income from selling one more good. Average cost, we take total cost divided by quantity produced. Operating cost is just the cost of operating the business. So how can a producer maximize profits? When thinking about how to maximize profits, producers need to think about the cost involved in producing one more unit of a good. In other words, they need to consider marginal cost. So producers take into consideration a number of different types of costs, right? Their operating costs, their variable costs, their total costs, their marginal costs. These are all things that they're going to look at when evaluating how much should I produce in order to maximize my profit. So labor and output really quick here. Business owners also have to decide how many people they are going to hire. So the addition of new workers will increase production until it eventually reaches a peak, at which point production actually decreases. So you can see here, as we continue to add workers, our output goes up, right? So our marginal product of labor is increasing. And then it starts to diminish. It starts to go down again, right? Now we're going to continue to hire workers up until we're going to hire 7 workers. Okay, we're going to hire 7 workers because as soon as we hire 8, our output actually starts to decrease because there's not enough work for that 8th person to do. So they're just costing the company money, and they're not producing any goods because there's not enough work to go around. So the addition of more workers to a firm, most of the time the benefit is that it allows for a greater amount of specialization. So if you open your own business and you're the only person running that business at the time, you got to work the till, you got to make the goods, you have to balance the till and do the accounting and pay the bills, and there's a million things to do, right? But if you hired a couple more workers, you could have someone that's doing production, someone that's doing customer service, someone that's doing bookkeeping, right? You can specialize. So specialization increases output, and then the firm enjoys increasing marginal returns as a result of that specialization. Eventually, though, as we mentioned, the benefits of specialization run out, and the addition of workers can actually decrease total output. So you can see in this diagram here, we have increasing marginal returns up until 3 laborers. And then we can continue to add more laborers, but each person that we add isn't going to give us as much as the previous hire did, right? So we have diminishing marginal returns for 4 through 9, workers number 4 through 9. After 7, it's actually a negative investment to make to hire an 8th or 9th worker because there's not enough for them to do. So this firm, as I showed you in the previous example, they could choose to hire 7, but that would be the most that they could hire. Their like peak here really is 3. So they should hire in that 3 to 7 range. All right. So then we have fixed and variable costs. So production costs are divided into those 2 categories, and fixed costs are mainly going to involve the production facility. They include things like rent, machinery repair, property taxes, workers' salaries, things that aren't going to change, right? The variable costs are going to include like the price of raw materials. So I mentioned lumber earlier. Some labor. Okay, you might be willing to let a couple of people go. So that could be variable costs. Electricity and heating bills, so on and so forth. The fixed costs and the variable costs are added together to find the total cost. So knowing the total costs of several levels of output helps a business determine their marginal cost of production at each level. In other words, they can figure out the additional cost of producing 1 more unit. So if we make 10 cars instead of 9 cars, what's that going to cost us? What's the payback going to be, right? So one way to find the best level of output is to figure out where marginal cost equals marginal revenue, or the additional income from selling 1 more good. So we have marginal cost, that's the curved line on this graph here, and then you have marginal revenue. So you're not selling the first car for 100 and the second car for 300, so on and so forth. Your products are all going to cost the same. So marginal revenue is going to be straight, right? We would choose to produce where these 2 lines intersect. That's where a business would set its output. Right there. So the firm's primary goal is to maximize profit. The firm wants to make the most profit with the least amount of total production costs. So this says, why is marginal revenue always equal to 24? You can see that here. Marginal revenue is the same as market price. So that's essentially what you're selling that good for. So the market price for each beanbag in this example is $24, and it doesn't change regardless of how many beanbags are produced. This is like a lot of numbers, but firms are looking at maximizing profit, right? So they're going to find the level of production where profit, this for this right column, is highest. So they could produce 9 or 10 beanbags per hour. would be really the optimal level of output. And you can see 10, we have marginal cost equals marginal revenue, right? 24 and 24, we said that's really where we're going to set our output. So determining a firm's profit, the graph shows how a firm's profit per hour can be determined by subtracting total costs from total revenue. So total revenue, all the money you bring in, minus total cost, all the money you spend to make a good, that's going to tell you your profit. Okay. So what would happen to output if the market price fell to $20? Okay, so if it went further down below the red line, you would have a decrease in output, right? Because now your intersection of marginal cost and marginal revenue is lower. And why would the firm increase output if the price of a beanbag rose to 37? Because it would result in a larger profit. So factories can start to lose money, right? And so sometimes even though a factory is producing at its most profitable level, the market price is just too low and the factory's total revenue is still less than their total cost. Maybe their good's not popular, right? Something happened. And so the price is just too low. So the factory owners have a couple of choices. They can either continue to produce goods and lose money, or they can shut down the factory. Now, sometimes a money-losing factory should really remain open. So a firm should keep their factory open, at least for the short term, if the total revenue from goods is greater than the cost of keeping the factory open. Because if you close your business, you are still going to have to pay that fixed cost, right? Your factory isn't going to sell overnight. So that cost is going to stick with you, right? So if you think this is like a short-term fluctuation in price, it's not worth it to you to try and sell your factory. That's going to be kind of challenging to do, right? So the firm should keep the factory open if total revenue is greater than the cost of keeping the factory open. In other words, do we sell enough to pay the bills? Maybe we don't make a profit, but we sell enough to pay the bills. They could also stay open if the benefit of operating the factory is greater than the variable costs. So a couple different things there, but long story short, if you are losing money, it may be worth it to continue to lose money in the short term if you're making like just enough money to pay your bills, or even maybe just a little bit less, because maybe that price will bounce back, right? All right, so that is section 2. Please let me know if you have any questions. Have a great rest of your day, guys.